There is no end to matter, there is no end to grace. There is no end to spirit, there is no end to space. And so we walk with hope in hand towards Zion's promised land. Through every trial, through every test, we seek his peace, we find his rest. There is no end to Zion, no end to love's pure call. For those who seek his promise will find it all in all in all. There is no end to Zion, no end to love's pure call. For those who seek his promise, we'll find her all in all in all.
Welcome into another Key of David podcast. I am joined by Trevor the Key Keys, and I don't see his name. I don't know why his name's not showing up. And David the Lion Douglas. And we also have our dear friend, Lance Weaver. There it is. There they are. Trevor dropped the key. I don't know why he dropped the key, but he is the key. And we got Lance Weaver. And you guys have seen a lot of episodes with Lance. In fact, we just re-released one of my favorite episodes on To Go No More Out, or the Doctrine of Eternal Lives. And we want to dive into that, but we want to get into our eternal progression in this podcast. So Lance, my man, oh, by the way, went to lunch with Lance and his wife. What was it? Tuesday of this week. Awesome. Lance must be a really good salesman because his wife was way better looking than him. They were awesome. We had so much fun just visiting with them. And Lance texted me as I'm driving, and he's like, Shane, we need to do a trip, take our wives to Monte Alban. And I'm like, oh, this would be a great, like, in the field podcast. Text Trevor. I say, Trevor, hey, you coming? Trevor's like, I'm in. I'm like, freaking David's broke. So David's probably out on this, but we've started a little campaign where we're trying to see if we can get the Zion Media fam to help send David out there with us so we can record all of this. And if you haven't seen Monte Alban, I'm going to ask David to put a picture of what Monte Alban is. And it is a mountain in Mexico. Where is it, Lance, exactly?
It's in Oaxaca, central Oaxaca, right by the city of Oaxaca in the state of Oaxaca. Amazing place. Holy cow, so cool.
It's like Trevor, tell me the alien thing that you said.
It looks like an alien civilization carved out the mountain with a laser.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense how.
And they built this structure, this temple on top of this thing. And I believe, and I prayed about this, so I really believe that this is the temple that Nephi built.
Yeah.
And I want to go see it.
Yeah, I showed you guys the LiDAR, right? I mean, the LiDAR is incredible. It's just like this. It already has a 2-column, 2-room, east-facing temple. The only one that fits the exact date from the Book of Mormon. But the LiDAR shows like the exact, like where the basins were, where the cistern held water, where the altar, which is still there. So cool.
So we're going probably, what are we thinking, November-ish time frame?
Yeah, we could do it somewhere in there.
Yes. Escape the cold, go to Mexico, see this place. But we all four want to go, and we really need David to go because he's our videographer, editor, all of those things. So if you want to see it, help us get David Douglas out there as well. But I'm excited to do that. Okay, with that said, I'm going to turn. Oh, go.
I got something. We need to start announcing our next 100 days, our contest that we're doing.
Oh yes.
Okay, so we are rolling out something fun to get our community involved, and we are going to be giving away $1,000 American, clarify, $1,000 cash to the Zion Media fan subscriber that recommends the best guest, like a future Lance, a future Alex Boyer. We're looking for somebody that is, faith-based, or they could be a sports figure, politics, culture, anyone that you guys think, I want that person on Zion Media. Or if you're watching this yourself and you're being like, I want to be on Zion Media, you could win yourself $1,000. What we're going to do is over the next 100 days, we are going to open up our link tree, and there's going to be a Google form if you go in there, and it's going to be a place where you can click on it. You can go in there and fill out your information. You can fill out information on who the guest is, why you think they would be a great guest for Zion Media. And then we want you to either take out your phone and record yourself and give us a little explanation of why this person would be perfect for Zion Media as a guest, or do an audio. We don't need a video, but we just want to hear it more. You know, it's a lot easier to perceive what your intention is versus just clickety-clicking on that. So how it's going to work is we're going to filter those in. We're going to go through them, scrub them, the ones that we like. We're going to reach out, contact, do a little pre-interview, see if they're podcast worthy, and then we're going to platform them. We're going to put them on the show. And as we put these on, once we get 2 or 3 people on, we're going to open our socials up for voting, where you as the fans are going to help us determine who is the best guest. Over the course of the 100 days, whoever is voted in as the best guest, it's kind of a 50-50 criteria. We believe it. And then the votes will determine who the winner is for the $1,000. And 100 days from now, before December 21st, we're going to get that $1,000 out. Someone will have some Christmas spending cash or some personal cash. So
Trevor, quick question. If I recommend, you guys should have Sylvester Stallone on your program, they need to introduce us to Sylvester Stallone.
So you got to be able to
just recommend somebody, and then it's like, not only do you recommend either yourself or somebody else, you got to bring them to the table.
Yep, you got to be the connector in chief.
If they know Tucker Carlson or someone big or like Elon Musk, they'd have to give us their number. Right.
Well, not only just give us their number, we don't want to call and be like, "Hey, David, give me your number." They need to make the connection. They need to help platform them.
Put us on a text thread. Put us on an email thread. You've got to be the connector in order to qualify.
Exactly. Okay. So that is content.
Hey, are you going to talk about the Tesla we're giving away, or is that in the future?
Yes. So this is real, okay? What I'm about to announce is real. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek. It's kind of a little bit being funny, but it's real, okay? So Zion Media is giving away a used 3-year-old or less Tesla Model 3, okay? You heard us right. We're giving away a Tesla Model 3 for any of our listeners that can connect us to one of the following people: John the Beloved, the Davidic servant, or any of the 3 Nephites. All right, I'm glad you laughed, Lance. We're sort of joking, but we're serious. Like, come on, like, if they're out there, we want to meet them. Part of us, creating Zion Media is, in preparation for the end times. And we know these guys are out there. We know these guys are coming, and we want to meet them.
So Trevor, what if somebody said, "Listen, I'm the Davidic servant"?
I was thinking right there.
That's what we're hoping for. That is exactly what we're hoping for, because we're going to have at least one podcast where we bring on people who claim to be the Davidic servant. And we've already been in contact with a couple of them. We have a girl Davidic servant. We've got 2 boy Davidic servants.
What qualifies the winning? They have to prove it somehow to us. We have to actually be convinced.
I have a paper. I've sent it to you, Lance. It's a significant paper. And if they can check all the boxes, I mean, listen, this goes down to they got to be born at a certain time period. This is like they would have to check all the boxes, fulfill all the Isaiah prophecies in order for us to prove that they indeed are the Davidic servant.
Something tells me if they really are, they're not going to be motivated by money or a Tesla.
No, it's not. We're not giving it to the Davidic servant. We're giving us to the person that connects us.
This has got to be like a friend.
Or one.
We're trying to convince them to betray their connection.
They'll get permission. They will see the mission of Zion Media. They will connect us. And here's the deal. We don't even have to go public and announce who these people are. We can give this car away and say, "Hey, good news, everyone. We found the Davidic servant. We gave away the Tesla." So It's kind of a little bit of a joke, but at the same time, it's not a joke. Like we'd be willing to give away a heck of a lot more than a Tesla Model 3 if you can connect us to one of these 3 people.
5 people.
The biggest part about this is it's not just checking the boxes. Like we need to get a spiritual confirmation that
That's
this
true.
person is actually legit and true. So those are the contests. We're going to be rolling out promos. You'll see videos, $1,000 and a Tesla from Zion Media.
Yeah.
We should have a checklist, that checklist, Shane, in Kimura.
I don't want people to know what the checklist is.
Oh,
Yeah. They need to come up with those things themselves.
Yeah.
got it.
Yep. Okay.
Anyways.
So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to our featured guest, probably our most prominent guest that we've had on Zion Media. One of my favorite dudes on the planet. I've referred to him as the Terrence Howard of Mormonism. Lance, the time is now yours.
All right, guys, you ready to go crazy here? All right. So I'm really excited about this topic. Okay, this is an awesome topic. We're going to talk about a whole lot of things. I'm going to see if I can cram it into an hour, and we might have to gloss over a lot of things. But this is also like this is not only like a kind of a heavy topic, and we could say like this is deep doctrine, but really it's not. I always say the same. Like there is no deep doctrine. There's doctrine and there's speculation. So we are going into speculation, right? But it is the coolest speculation you've ever heard, right? It's like people's favorite speculation. And not only that, it's the type of speculation that is like it's really dear to my heart. Like this is a very personal type of topic, right? And I'll tell you why. So when I've told my story a little bit before, but 2 months before my mission, right? I remember hanging out with friends, just like we were out at a little party. It was great, but the night, for some reason, I got let out of work early and I got to the party and things were not cool for some reason. It was weird, like something was just like heavy. I went home and like everybody is there. There's like 10 cars out in front of my house. And I walk in the door and it sucked. It was like, my whole bishopric is there in my house and all these people and everybody's faces are like bad. It's like, what the crap happened, right? So anyway, I walk back through the living room into the family room, and my mom's there, and she's like bawling. My brother bawling. I'm like, shit, what happened? Anyway, find out my dad died, right? So totally just devastating. Like, what a crappy. It was rough. It was rough. Right. So, if anyone's gone through that, you know that you've got basically a full year where your life sucks, right? When someone really close to you dies, the next year sucks. You feel it. You feel like a piece of your brain and heart is just like ripped away from you, right? And I have my explanations for that. I really think like the neurons where that person occupies that piece of your brain end up dying. And so a part of you dies literally. But that like, kind of lit a fire in me too, because it's like I said, I had the funeral, was a couple weeks after that. I had a month and a bit, and then I went right into the MTC. So I am devastated, and I'm in the MTC, and I was already very kind of spiritually inclined. I'd read the Book of Mormon more than once before I went in the MTC. I'd read a lot of scriptures before the MTC. I've really prepared a lot, but then when I went in the MTC, it was like I wanted to know what happens when we die, right, in a personal way. Only if you've gone through that experience do you know how that makes you want to know, So on my mission, I just like devoured everything that the church had. It wasn't just like a cursory reading, me just kind of going over what does the church say about the afterlife. It was like I want to know every single aspect of it. And as soon as I finished my mission and got home, then it was like, okay, now I can read not just the church stuff. I want to know every single detail. I want to see it. I want to know everything for myself. And so I delved into. The first thing I started with was near-death experiences, right? And when I got off my mission, the internet was just barely starting to catch on. So I could get, there was a couple sites that were up where people were sharing their near-death experiences. And for like that 6 to 7 years after my mission, I read thousands. Like there really are online. There's thousands. There's sites like indie.com that have like 10,000 near-death experiences on there, right? Some are 2 lines long and some of them are 10 pages. But there's so many. And I read through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And then after that, I got into a couple of texts. I just scoured, and you go into Cumorah and you can see all the texts we have in there. A lot of these are like things that I was just searching. I just want to know. I wanted something that gave me an idea of what like the eternal cosmology, like the spiritual cosmology is. Where do we go? How does that work through eternity, through time and space? And so I found a couple of them that were just like really spectacular. And I'm going to share those with the audience today and kind of go through and give a little outline of what they share. And not only that, so my big thing is every single source that you find is a little bit different, right? And so finding the common threads through all of these different experiences and then kind of weaving them together, it's amazing the way that it changes your view of kind of like the eternal progression, right? And I'm going to show how I believe very strongly that our revelations on eternal progression, especially, D&C 76, they're amazing. If you haven't read them, and if you're not a Mormon, come on, check them out. They really are spectacular. I'm going to show you how they correlate with all these near-death experiences and all these other books of people who say they've seen, said they've been there. And not only that, though, I'm going to show you ways that that they're a little bit off, right? That they're actually right, but that our interpretation of them, our cultural interpretation of them, is a little bit off. And I'm going to try and correct that. And I hope that people can share that. So this is like such an important topic. I know that this is kind of crazy. And we're going to delve into a bunch of speculation, but I want to maybe start like just with a little prayer. Okay. So for all our Christian friends out there, everyone who's watching, I hope you bear with us. I don't really like doing this in public. I don't like doing it on videos very much, but this is a topic that's so dear to me that I feel like a spiritual power when I talk about it. And I just want to make sure that we're all square. And I think a prayer is kind of the best way to do that. Okay. Yeah. If you guys let's just like humor me on this, let's go for it. Right.
I love this, Lance. Just so you know, I love this. So thank you for doing this.
Okay. So here we go. I'll just say it real short. Okay. Okay. So our Father in heaven, we are thankful that, we get to have the internet, have this online community that we can all meet together and share our ideas. We're thankful for all the knowledge that was given us. We ask thee to be with us as we talk about this topic. Give us light, give us knowledge, help us to be led into the right paths, help us to be able to incorporate anything that resonates with us into our hearts in a way that makes us to be better and to draw near to thee, and to be able to cloud out anything that might confuse us or make us go toward paths that are not in our best interest and don't lead us to thee. We're thankful again for all they have, for all that we've been given and for the gospel. And we say this in his name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you. So let's dive into this because I love this topic. The afterworld is so spectacular. And so what we're going to talk about, I'm just going to go over a really close 10,000 foot overview of the afterworld as we often teach it, in the gospel, as it's known in Christianity and in our church as well. And then let's jump into these other texts, and then we're going to come back to it and see and compare the two and see what they've got.
So Lance, is this, this kind of everything you put together, is this something that helped you in reconciling, where your dad is, reconciling the afterlife, and did this bring you like some peace?
Immensely. First of all, when I really started getting into it, I started having these experiences where beings would come and teach me, right in that between wake and sleep, right? So a lot of people are going to think, well, that was a dream. You can call it what you want, when people have kind of these visionary experiences. But I had these experiences where after I had read a bunch, I really felt like I was having experiences with people from the afterworld. And so it was very consoling, right? And very
Lance, can I share something before we jump into this? I had an experience yesterday. So I went to the temple, and I think this kind of will set the stage. I went to the temple yesterday, and I did initiatories. And in the initiatory, they talk about, I remembered it, they would say the name, and they would say, who is dead? And I didn't hear who is dead. And so I thought, oh, maybe that's only in the baptistry. So after I got done, I called for somebody from the temple presidency because I had a question. And I asked the question of, do we only say who is dead in the baptistry, like, I baptize you for and in behalf of John so-and-so, who is dead, in the name of the Father, Son, and then they baptize him, right? And he said, yeah, we don't say that anymore. In any of it, they don't say who is dead. And I asked him, I said, why not? And he said, because they're alive. And I was like, huh? What does that mean? And he's like, well, I'm not going to go into it. But suffice it to say, they're not dead.
Wow.
Okay, that's deeper than most people are going to realize. And let's make sure we hit on why. Okay, that's awesome. Okay, let's go. That's absolutely in my notes, that exact point. Okay, because we are at a pivotal time in history. Okay.
Are we able to zoom in on this screen when you get started?
Yeah, that's a good call, Dave. So that we lose the sidebar and
just yeah, that looks good. You could also hit Control +sign to zoom in too, like to make the text bigger.
Yeah, let's see. Actually, I can just do this. I can't. Sorry, guys. I have it in another place, it's my site, but you can just jump on here and take a look at it. Okay, but let's just glance over this and go to the next things, and then we'll come back to it. Okay, I just want people to kind of understand the general plan of salvation, right, that we teach. Right, our church has a belief in the premortal existence. A lot of Christian churches don't. I don't think that it's really that important. That's something that we talked about in our last discussion on To Go No More Out, right?
I like how you called it the premortal existence, because sometimes we refer to it as the pre-existence, and we've always existed. So there is no such thing as pre-existence, but there is a pre-this earth life existence.
Yeah, there's a pre-earth life. And then we come to this earth life, right? You could say to get bodies, but really just to go through experiences that help us progress, right? And become more like our Heavenly Father. So after we die, the belief is that we go to a place called the world of spirits. And we're going to talk a little bit about the divisions in that world of spirits. It's separated into most Christianity. It says a heaven and a hell. We're going to talk a little bit about how Joseph Smith actually expanded that view and how all of these near-death experiences strangely seem to go along with it. But just give us a minute on that. And then after that, there is a resurrection from the dead, right? And that resurrection from the dead comes back to Earth itself, right? And there's different beliefs on this, but I want to go through these books and help people kind of walk them through how these things actually all agree with each other for the most part. But the idea that resurrection from the dead, right, we're going to be coming back to Earth itself, right, when the Earth is transfigured and gains a higher state, right? And so then let me just go through these different texts really quick. If you go, I have a part of my site that's called text right here. And it just has, in fact, there's an entire thing that, like, after death. If you go here, I have some links to a lot of these near-death experience repositories, databases, essentially, that, like I said, have thousands of near-death experiences. And near-death experiences, are a global phenomenon. They're far more prevalent in Christian countries, right? They're starting to pick up in Islamic countries where you have a lot more Islamic people. And strangely, most people in Islam that I've read about that have near-death experiences end up seeing Christian elements, right? They're either seeing Jesus or seeing...
I heard one before. It was phenomenal. This woman, she had all this shame from her father. And when she passed, she realized that all those ideas that she had from Islam just faded away, and that only the love of her actual father mattered. And he had asked for forgiveness. It was just a remarkable story.
And I mean, that's for sure probably the most common theme, if not the most, very close to it, that all of the kind of differences that separate us in near-death experiences, people transcend those, right? When they come in contact with these higher beings, the higher beings are love. Like, they are unity. They are a gathering force. And so all the things that we kind of hold into part of our ego on this earth that make us separate from other people tend to melt away, right? And we become kind of unified with life and with the world and with nature and with everything in those near-death experiences, right? And so I encourage people to go and read lots of these near-death experiences. And then after that, maybe jump into some of these other books that I think are really powerful. So one of the first ones that I really got into, and I'd read lots of before this, but one of the most detailed that I just thought was really fantastic is this book called Gone West, right? And there's actually a series of 3 books by this man named J.S. Inman Ward, right? So John Sebastian Ward. His daughter still has like a newsletter where she kind of has a community, a Christian community following in her dad's footsteps. But his books are spectacularly detailed. He goes into so much detail about the afterworld. And the other two texts that I'm going to go over, I'll come back to this one in a second, right, are one called OASP. So if you've ever heard of OASP, in fact, if you just go to my text channel, I kind of have these the Law of One and OASP. These two are interesting. Like I said, we should consider them apocryphal. We should consider them as something that you just, they're not all true. There's lots of things in there I don't agree with, but there's such spectacular views of the afterworld. And they
Lance, can I read something real quick? Doctrine and Covenants, section 91.
Yeah.
Which, for those of you who are not members of the LDS faith, this is also a revelation or additional scripture for you to check out. It says, "Verily, thus saith the Lord unto you concerning the Apocrypha. There are many things contained therein that are true, and it is mostly translated correctly." And then it goes on to say, you should check it out. You should read it, and you should use the Holy Ghost to know what is true and what isn't true.
Yeah. I mean, we had scriptures directing us to search out the best books, whether they're scripture or not. But when people say that they've received something from the afterworld, you should check it out, and you should use the Spirit to discern what things in there are true and what things in there either aren't true or just can't fit into your worldview at the time. And so even though they might be objectively true, maybe to you they're not true because you're just not, they don't fit with the way that you think right now. You can't see them correctly. So anyway, I think this OASP and the Law of One, they are really, really interesting. They both give, like I say, we're going to go through some of the details of each one individually of how crazy they agree, like the amount of agreement. And it's crazy because if you just jump into them and read them maybe once with a very hard heart, you're going to just see the differences and you're going to be like, oh, well, this makes no sense. I don't even get it. Like they all just say something totally different. But once you really open your heart to them and really look at them, you'll be like, holy cow, they are all saying the exact same thing. Like, wow, there's really actually very different differences. They're just focusing on completely different aspects, kind of like the mice and the elephant, right? One's like filling the trunk and one's filling the legs and one's filling the tail. And once you get a picture of the whole thing, you're like, oh, this is the same beast. Even though if you're part of the blind group, you might still think, oh, these are completely different. This is a rope and a pole. So let's go in and talk about this really quick. So this J.S.M. Ward and his ideas, wow, they're just spectacular. And so what happened is his brother died, I think in World War I. John's brother died in World War I. And not too long after the death of his brother, he started having these visionary experiences where his brother would visit him in the same way that I say I have my experiences, in that kind of hypoponic state right between sleep and wakefulness. His brother would come and just teach him immensely. And then he wrote the book after what his brother said. And his brother kind of meets him on, what they call the astral plane, but it's essentially a plane where it's difficult to access, but people with special gifts from the spirit world can go onto this intermediate plane between us and the spirit world, and people on Earth can go onto this intermediate plane, usually in some kind of a trance or in some kind of a morning wakeful state, and exchange information. And in his visions, his brother brings him all these different people because he finds that there's all these realms to the afterworld and that nobody knows, just like this world, right? Like pretend if you're an alien and somebody on this world's trying to tell you what it's like and they're like, oh, it's a barren desert. There's all these sand and it's complete. There's no water anywhere and it's just a desert because they landed in the middle of the Sahara Desert, right? And then some other person goes to the middle of the rainforest and they're telling, no, it's not. It's like completely wet. It's trees, and they might think that it's two different places, but it's like, that's how the spirit world is. There's very different places. And his brother says that in order to get a picture of the entire thing, you have to be able to contact people who have been to the other realms because they don't interact that much. Does that make sense? So there's all these different heavens within heaven, and there's all these different hells. And so one of the most informative parts, I think, of his book is a diagram that his brother draws for him, right? And this is it right here. So his brother draws this diagram and says, look, this is essentially how it's laid out. And the way that I know this is because I've talked to people who've been to hell, and there's all this huge story of the officer who goes to hell and works his way up from hell so that he could communicate to his brother. And he talks to this guy named the monk who's actually from heaven and comes down. And he talks about how people are kind of stuck in these different regions of the spirit world.
Zoom in a little more.
Let's see if I can.
That is wild.
Okay, we're going to go.
And as you're doing that, I haven't listened to a ton of near-death experiences, but I've heard that same, theme over and over again, how people are stuck in different levels. Like I've heard it explained that it's almost like a force field that's can't get through.
Yeah, and in a lot of these texts, you'll notice that most of them, even though you can break things,
it even has, you see this, it has, sorry to interrupt, as Jews and Mormons, and like it has.
Really? I'm going to hit that in a second. Okay, this guy was not Mormon. He didn't really know much about Mormonism. But if you'll notice here, the one sect of all the Christian sects that goes the very highest is Mormons.
Whoa.
South Park. Park.
Yeah, and I want to make this, so we're going to hit this, okay? There's so much here. I wish I could. I know that we're not even going to be able to touch a tenth, a hundredth of all the things that I'd love to tell people. But do you notice that Mormons then do melt into Christianity, into just followers of Christ, right? And there's an important reason for that. And notice that our prophet just recently said, hey, stop calling yourselves Mormons, call yourself Christians, because you're not Mormons, right? You are followers of Christ. There's an important reason for that. We're hitting a major point in our progression as a church. But anyway, a lot of this just not going to make sense to people, but I want to hit it on things. Okay, so we have these different realms, right? And the three realms that he talks about, first is hell, and he goes through kind of some of the details of hell, and obviously the lowest realms of hell have to do with people who actually like worship evil and who are absolutely horrible, beings. And then he talks about, the schools of the babes and how they make it out, and how important faith is in order to make your way out of hell into purgatory, right? Or the middle kingdom, right? The high kingdom, which he gives up here, is actually just the realm of light. So heaven, the most high heaven where the high beings are, is heaven. And then this middle realm is purgatory, and it's where people work their way up into the highest heaven. Okay. Now let me really quick, let's jump to DNC 76, because this chart and all the other things we're going to go to help to dispel some of the myths that we have, right, in the church. So let's just really quick, and I talk about these, like I say, in my clearing up, anyway, this article here, I'm misunderstanding this LDS view of the afterlife. So I believe our scriptures are absolutely perfect, right? They are revelations, and they are not wrong in any way, shape, or form. But our understanding of them has been a little bit twisted. And one of the primary ways that I believe that our understanding has been twisted is the way that we look at the 3 degrees of glory versus the spirit world, right? Now, a lot of this comes from not only from, God, what order do I want to talk about this? Because OASP has a lot of detail about this too. In fact, I might jump into OASP just really quick before No. Okay, I'm going to talk about one thing really quick, okay? Let's just really quick go to DNC 76.
Okay.
And I want to point you to one concept that I think is very important. Okay, so he talks about the celestial, the terrestrial, and the celestial kingdom. And this is all going to make sense. Bear with me here, people. Okay, so he talks about these 3 kingdoms in the same way that John Sebastian Ward, right, in Gone West, talks about these 3 different kingdoms. And he says that in the lower kingdom, right, he says the glory of the terrestrial is one, even as the glory of the moon is one. The glory of the telestial is one, even as the glory of the stars are one, right? And then he says about the telestial, even so differs one glory from another. For these are they, so he's talking about the telestial kingdom, for these are they who are Paul and who are of Apollos and of Cephas. These are they who say they are some of one and some of another, some of Christ and some of John, some of Moses and some of Elias, some of Isaiah and some of Isaiah and some of Enoch. And might I add, because it is obviously the exact same thing, if he's saying there are people in the spirit world who say they are some of Christ and some of John, right? We might add here, and some of Joseph and some of Brigham and some of...
You have no, and I've been telling you guys this, and I'm not going to talk about it on this podcast, but I've been telling you that some of Brigham have just realized some of the things aren't as they thought they were. So they're learning in this realm. But I'm not going to get into that.
And what Shane means by that is University of Utah football kills Cougar football.
That's exactly what he's talking about. Sure. All right. Davis County, man. You don't have that on your garage, do you? I do people with it in their lawn.
Yeah.
Next to the you. All right. Jumping out. Or let's jump out of that. But that's the exact way.
They are some of this and some of that. Like, what does that mean?
Okay. So listen, so these are people who are, this is talking about sectarianism, right? You say these are people who are divided, and they key on to their prophet, whether it be John or Isaiah. They have their prophet, their leader, right? Maybe it's like their leader of their Christian sect in modern day. Maybe it's their Justin Joseph Smith. But the fact is that they key in and they believe they are part of this group, right? But they receive not the gospel, neither the testimony of Jesus, neither the prophets, neither the everlasting covenant. Last of all, these are they who will not be gathered with the saints to be caught up in the church of the firstborn and be received in the cloud. These are they who are liars and sorcerers and adulterers and whoremongers and whoever loves to make a lie. These are they who suffer the wrath of God on earth, right? These are they who suffer the vengeance of eternal fire. I want to really hit on this. He says that in the Telestial Kingdom, there are followers of all the prophets, but they didn't receive the actual gospel, right? And in all these near-death experiences, this is something that hits, like they go into such detail. You can be part of any church you want. You can be part of that whole sectarian world that is completely divided, and you believe your truth. You got it, right? You're a follower of Joseph. You're a follower of Isaiah. You're a follower of any of the prophets, right? They're a follower of Esaias, right? So Elias, like this same as Elijah, like these are people who had the priesthood. These are people who were translated into heaven. They were giving their followers, obviously, like priesthood keys. They had the truth. But if you were a follower of them, but you didn't actually receive the gospel of Jesus Christ, and Jesus goes into this in detail, right? They say, well, how do we know? Like, who's thy father? Like who are your true followers? And he's like, well, it's whoever treats their brother like themselves, whoever loves God with all their heart, mind, and strength, and whoever loves others as themselves. Like, that's my true followers. That's a true gospel of Jesus Christ. So you can be a follower of whatever prophet and whatever priesthood that you want. But if you haven't actually learned the true root of the gospel, which is to love thy brother as thyself, where are you going? You're going with the sorcerers and the liars. Right?
Let me flip that. I'm going to flip that just so people understand this. Love thyself. And when you love thyself, then it becomes a lot easier to love your brothers and sisters.
I mean, they're inseparable, right? You can't just separate. And you definitely need to, I think, love others as thyself. I think you need to start. Well, we're not going to go in here because there's a lot of different confusion that could come in between the idea of loving self and loving others. And we're going to actually get into that when we get into the law of one, because it's a base motif of the difference between loving others and loving yourself. But the real point I want to hit on here is the idea of sectarianism, right? And this is the same thing that's being taught in that chart.
When you say sectarianism, it's such an uncommon word. What do you mean by that?
I was going to ask that same thing.
Right. And so sectarianism has to do with having multiple sects, in our case of Christianity, but sectarianism is all religions. There's multiple sects within Islam or within any religion, and Buddhism. You can always tell somebody in those religions who truly loves everybody and isn't basically bound by the group identity of their particular sect, of their particular branch of religion that they're following, right? And I think that this is truly what DNC 76 is trying to hit on. It's trying to tell the difference between the true followers of Christ, who aren't really bound by their sectarian divisions. And we absolutely know this. If you go to conference and you see those people out picketing who are trying to destroy the faith of another group, right? And how many of us on our missions, how many times did our mission president tell us, we do not fight, we do not Bible bash. We're not out there to bash other people. We're not out there to take faith away from other groups. We're there to bring people to Christ. Because there's a major distinction here. If you are so sure that your church is right, whether you be an evangelical or a Mormon or a Pentecostal, and you are so sure that you've got the truth and those other guys are going to hell, right? You're part of that sectarian problem, right? If you have any kind of enmity in your heart towards your brother, and instead of trying to lift them up and feed them and clothe them and bring them to heaven in ways that are actually meaningful, if instead you're like, well, I'm just going to break down their false beliefs, instead of being like, well, I'm going to learn from their false beliefs and build on whatever separated beliefs that we have, so we can
exactly. Do you remember the talk? President Hinckley is like, bring what you have. Let's build on each other. And I see a beautiful day. I've had a dream, and in my dream, I saw a Baptist minister who had his shepherd who was teaching the restored doctrines, and he incorporated the Book of Mormon, and he incorporated Joseph Smith's visions, and he was pulling from all these different places, but he was still the shepherd to his flock. He was still Baptist, but teaching truth. And I thought, maybe that's what the millennium is. I always wondered, like, in the millennium, it's like there's going to be other churches. And I thought, how could that be? Maybe as I was pondering that, had the street, maybe that's how it is.
Yeah.
So I wanted to comment, just as I've been studying this church, this kingdom that Christ has for us. At first I thought when I joined the church that the church, I mean, maybe you've seen one of those primary color sheets or whatever, where you have the different levels of the building. You have the pillars, maybe the priesthood is a foundation, and you have these different rooms that represent different priesthoods. I always thought the church was something like that. But then as I keep reading about Christ's church and what that really means, his kingdom, is that I realize the pillars that represent the priesthood and the floors, the different levels, they're all still there, but the walls aren't. That it's basically available for everybody. Like, Christ really does lead different people, specifically those that are actually listening to him. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm going to try and push forward with this, even though I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but I really think this concept, and maybe let me just go off for a second here, because there's so many points here that I really need to try and get, really hit on. So first of all, the idea, right, that those who are separated into sects and who truly focus on differences instead of commonalities, right, and who destroy instead of build, and that they are in a lower state. That's obvious here on Earth too, right? Like you can look at a country where there is sectarian violence, which is pretty common in the Islamic world and was definitely common in the Christian world, right, in the early Renaissance, where you had these different sects warring against each other. 100 Years' War. There's so many wars that were caused by different religious groups focusing on their differences enough that they would kill each other over them. So, I mean, this should be a no-brainer. It should be a no-brainer. Like, if you want a heaven, if you want a heaven, the same principles that create a heaven on earth are the same principles that are going to create a heaven in the spirit realm. Does that make sense? So what things create unity and love and a truly heavenly group, on earth? Is it focusing on your differences? Is it trying to prove everybody wrong until you get so pissed off at each other that you want to punch each other, and then after that you're going to start killing each other? Like, this is such a no-brainer. It's so obvious, and yet it's so easy to get caught into fights with our Christian brothers, right? And we definitely know it being the brunt of it in Mormonism, because for so long, all the other churches want to do is tell us how evil we are and how we're of Satan and how we're going to hell and blah, blah, blah. When it's like, well, we know we're just trying to build the kingdom. Why can't you accept us? Why can't you just focus on our commonalities? And the good people out there in Christianity do that. And the people who are in hell, right? This is the Telestial Kingdom. It says, behold, this is hell. Right there in DNC 76, right here. These are they who are cast down to hell and suffer the wrath of the Almighty God, right? People who are caught into this idea. I hope that as members of the church, for sure, that we never get caught in this mindset, ever, right? And if you will read these texts that I'm giving you, it will actually do amazing things as far as lifting your vibration and lifting the way that you think into focusing on those commonalities and climbing your way out of this sectarian creed where you believe that you are right, everyone else is going to hell, or that everyone else is going to be thrust down to the Telestial Kingdom until we do their temple work. There's complexities there because our scriptures are true, but you just got to understand them correctly.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I really wish members would fix. It's something that I started when my kids were really little in sacrament meeting, and it's an innocent, trope, but kids get up to the microphone. We all know exactly what they're going to say, and they start off with the exact same sentence every single time. I'd like to bear my testimony, and I know this church is true. And it creates this narrow focus of like, nothing else is true. We're the walls have it.
Of the thing that Lance didn't understand earlier.
David's walls, and there's so much truth out there, and yeah, I really wish that was something, because it wasn't until I was on my mission I heard Shane talk about it, and where we're like, whoa, there's other churches out there, and like, what do they believe? What are the commonalities? And that is exactly what Hinckley was talking about when he was just like, bring your good, bring it all.
Yeah. I mean, if you share my screen really quick, you'll see I have a whole article that you can kind of go through called The Only True Church, right? So that concept of the only true church is an important one. And it's not something I would get into too much here because it's so easy to misunderstand. But notice we have multiple different scriptures. Most people key in on D&C 1, where it's like, well, this is the only true and living church upon the whole face of the earth, which I, the Lord, am well pleased, at least in 1834 when that revelation was given. Speaking to the church collectively and not individually. But so they key in on these certain scriptures and then completely ignore scriptures like D&C 10, right? D&C 10, 67 through 68 says, behold, this is my doctrine. Whosoever repenteth and cometh unto me, the same is my church. And whosoever declareth more or less than this, the same is not of me, but is against me. Therefore, is not of my church.
Right? So, Lance, these are in our scriptures.
Yeah.
So why do we key in on only one thing and we forget about what D&C... I'm going to go to D&C 10, 67, 68. I'm sure I've read it, but now I'm like seeing it.
Okay, so this fits into, if you've ever heard of Fowler's stages of faith, this is just a natural state of progression of both individuals and groups and churches, right? When we're young, we want to belong to a tribe. We want to be right. We want to be the best. We want to, our pride is just bustling because that's kind of the stage of life. Right. And as we get a little older, that's when kind of pluralism takes effect, when we're trying to find a unity and trying to build on common beliefs. And so the church and individuals, I think, all go through these things within their own lifespans, where early on they just focus on things that point out the differences. And I'm in this boat. I think all of us have been there. We first, when we're trying to learn, focus on things that make us better than everyone else, that make us right, because we want to be right from the beginning. We don't want to start on the wrong path. Right. But as you progress in your faith, you stop being quite so literal, quite so dogmatic, right? Which is what, Joseph Smith, the big lesson he got when his vision happened, right? What did the Lord say? He said, all the churches are wrong because all fall short of the glory of God, right? He goes through all the scripture that's like, everybody's wrong. But here.
What do you think it was meant where it said they lack the power or something like that in there as well? Is that, Are we referring to the restoration of the priesthood?
Absolutely, right? Exact same thing. They deny the power thereof, right? They have a form of godliness denying the power thereof. It's like they're using all these revelations, but the power thereof is the Holy Ghost. And what does the Holy Ghost bring us to do? To love each other. We always need to understand that. How do we know if we're a true follower of Christ? Christ gave us the way. You can tell a true follower of Christ by the way they treat others, right? By the way they love each other. But that also does not mean that the scriptures aren't true, right? That doesn't mean that we need to go into go sing Kumbaya and give up religion completely and say that it's evil, like so many have chosen that path. And I want to get into that in a second too, because that too does not lead to good, right? That does not lead to the unity which brings us to harmony both in this world and in the eternal world, because it's harmony between people that creates a heaven on earth. It's that same harmony that creates a heaven in the spirit world. Exactly.
If ye are not one,
you are not mine. Yeah, it's absolutely that unity. So anyway, you can go ahead and read My Only True Church and kind of give your own idea on which scriptures you want to focus on. Do you want to focus on the scriptures that this differentiate us, or do you want to focus on the scriptures that unify us? Right. Yeah. And there's scriptures that go both ways, and there's really, really interesting concepts when it comes to the only true church, and whether it's a dichotomy or whether it's one and the other. I have a lot of different ideas here. But let me jump in, because OASP had some really fantastic things to say as far as this idea. Because how do we reconcile the idea that if we know that it's love and we know that it's unity, so why do we need a church? Is it even important to have a church? If eventually the idea of sectarianism, if we know that's kind of the lowest kingdoms of the spirit world, well, then what is it? How do we get to the highest kingdoms? Do we give up religion? The truth is no, we absolutely do not. And OASP goes into a lot of detail. Okay, so let me just search for a couple different parts of here that are so enlightening, just very interesting. Okay, so OASP has this idea of grades, right? And it talks about the exact same thing as the other ones do. 3 resurrections: the first resurrection, the second resurrection, and the third resurrection, right? Which is essentially the telestial, the terrestrial, and the celestial, right? Okay, in this, it talks about the first resurrection, which is the lowest resurrection, And right here it says the lowest resurrection, just like what JSMF Ward says, it is characterized by individuality, on people focusing on me. It's selfishness, right? People who put themselves before anybody else are bound for the first resurrection, which is the Telestial Kingdom, which is the kingdom of sectarianism, which is hell, right? Because they haven't connected with other people. It's just like it says here, the sphere of the first resurrection. These are the lowest order of spirits in heaven. The sphere includes those of inorganic heavens, meaning they are not part of communities, right? That belong to no society or organization, being strolling players, wandering about, doing mainly for self as individual spirits, manifesting to mortals. These are individualists, okay? And this spirit has taken over our society, and it's taking our society to hell. It will lead to war, and it always does. Individualism leads to war, okay? If you are not unifying with your neighbor, then you are separating from your neighbor. And if you're separating from neighbor, be prepared for war, which is hell, right? It's the hallmark of hell, both in this world and the next world. Okay, so then what brings us to a higher level? The second resurrection, it says, right? This higher level, this terrestrial level, is fraternities and churches. The second sphere is the beginning of the second resurrection. Spirits of this order, second S and grade, begin to have association in heaven, right? Association with others, but limited. Christian, Buddhists, Islamists, Brahmins belong to this grade. Mortals under the ban of the second grade of bondage usually accept and announce themselves as followers of some savior person in a sectarian way, right? So they are now starting to learn the principles of association, of love, of loving my brother, of the true gospel of Jesus Christ, like it's talking about there in DNC 76, which is association, which is brotherhood, which is joining together as a group for a common good. They start to learn those. And where do they start to learn those? Churches. That's what teach all through history. That's what's brought people into that place, right? But then the third grade, right? The third resurrection. Communities. The third sphere is the beginning of the third resurrection in heaven. Spirits in this rate have risen above being just followers of a sectarian group that they concentrate so much on that it separates them from other groups. In fact, this is the beginning of the emancipation of the human soul. Spirits of this sphere only come to organic associations of mortals who practice doing good to one another with all their wisdom and strength. They cast aside all gods and saviors. And I don't mean that they cast them aside as in we no longer believe in Christ. They just understand what Christ actually is. They give up their idols, right? Because you can make Christ an idol. And that's what DNC 76 is saying when it's saying these are some of Christ, some of Apollos, some of Moses. These are people who have made, whether it be Christ himself or whether it be one of the prophets, into their idol. They've chiseled these people into something that fits their preconceived notions, right? Into their own kind of pocket God instead of worshiping the true person behind that. And Owassi really goes into detail between the false and the trues and how the lower heavens are full of false people. They're full of false people who say, oh, I'm the Messiah. I am Elias reincarnated. I am, every false prophet you can get. There's groups who have these people at their head, but they haven't learned the true gospel of Jesus Christ. And what is that? Serving your brother with full heart, mind, and mind. It's forming Zion, right? So they cast aside the false gods and saviors, right? And they bow to the creator, to the true God. And then this is the beginning of nations, of becoming one. And let me go to it. There's a couple of really cool scriptures here. Let me find this one. Basically, I'll kind of summarize some of the things that it talks about. One of the main points that it talks about is that people whose personal progression is only on the telestial level on earth get ministered to by telestial spirits, right? And John West talks about the exact same thing. People who have graduated to the second grade, to the second resurrection, the terrestrial kingdom, get ministered to by terrestrial spirits. Okay, so then that means that once you become part of a church, you can actually start getting taught by these churches in heaven, and their amount of knowledge far surpasses, right? Anyone now, obviously, who's in hell, who's in those lower grades. But this is the thing that I really want people to remember, and maybe I'll try and find a scripture in a second that Owaspi teaches that brings very true to my heart. Okay, the highest resurrection, they only appear to groups who have gone past the terrestrial kingdom on earth. So the celestial beings, right, part of the third resurrection, the celestial beings only will appear to groups that have made it past or to the upper reaches of the terrestrial glory on earth. Does that make sense what I'm saying? In other words, God the gods, literally, but God and the high angels in the high parts of heaven, they minister to people who have graduated from being in a religious group, a brotherhood that has actually learned to attain Zion. Okay, and if we read the D&C, it goes into so much detail in this. That it's like God wants to redeem Zion, but in order to redeem Zion, we have to reach a certain level. And that level, first of all, you have to give up individuality. You have to give up individualism. You have to join a church or a brotherhood that works its hardest to serve others. And once you've mastered that, now those little groups, those little Zion communities are worthy to be ministered to by those who are resurrected. By the
Hey, Lance, I just want to read D&C 121:28 because you had brought up the gods. And I just want to read this so people understand what's in the scriptures. It says, a time to come, which I believe is right now, and I believe what you're bringing to the table are many of these things. A time to come in the which nothing shall be withheld, whether there be one God or many gods, they shall be manifest.
Yeah, and you know what? That whole argument, that's with so many things in religion and sectarianism. It's just an argument of semantics. Like, you want to call them high angels or do you want to call them gods? What's the difference? And what does it matter? What does it matter? Should that divide you from me? Should we not work together as an evangelical or a Mormon because one of us calls the highest angels archangels and one of us calls them gods? Like OASB calls them gods. Like, read this text. It goes into so much detail and says that these people who are in the highest heavens are lords and gods, right? That's the title. But that translator could have just as easily called them archangels, and he'd be talking about the exact same being. So what does it matter that we call them different words?
It is semantics, and it is Satan's way of creating dysfunction and creating individuation, and it destroys unification, which is the goal. This is the law of one, becoming unified, becoming one.
Exactly, because that is Zion, right? That everything in our scriptures point to these exact same facts that are taught in all these texts. Like, we're coming close to this, and OASB talks in detail about this idea that there's these things called dans. So these periods of times where these galactic, and I've talked about this in some of the other videos we've made, these galactic conditions would probably involving gravity waves, in my opinion, but that's a little speculative. But these gravity waves coming through the universe actually fold time in and of itself. But OASB and JSM Ward say the same thing, that when these galactic events happen, they make it so that groups can jump up through the heavens. It's almost like dropping barriers.
Is the city of Enoch a good example of that?
Yeah, and I like OASB has some amazing insights on that too, and you can take it for what it's worth. You can read it. I mean, it's 1,000 pages long. I spent a lot of time in it. The Love One talks a little bit about this, similar things, but it's like, yeah, you've got these certain times, and we're about to hit one where the same thing happened when Christ came, when Christ's resurrection hit. Right? Christ wasn't the only; he was the first fruits of the resurrection, and he was the first one of a whole group of resurrected beings. Because one of these things hit the earth, and we had this period of resurrection where suddenly the gateways, the gates between the kingdoms dropped, and you could have progression between the kingdoms, which only happens on these periods, on these times and seasons, right? And so when those times and seasons hit, you got to be ready, and everyone who's ready can go to the bridegroom, go to the marriage feast.
Yeah,
exactly, right. And this is what's about to happen. We're about to hit one, but what level are you going to jump up to? And the most important level, the one that the strongest gate exists between, is the gateway into the celestial kingdom, right? And in order to, and I'm going to cover something in a second, but in order to do that, you need to be part of a group, a fellowship that is working together in a common good, and who has given up your notions that keep you separated from the rest of humanity, your sectarian notions that make you so different. This is why it's so important that President Nelson has said, okay, we're not Mormons anymore. We're not going to go by that. We are followers of Jesus Christ, right? Because he's led the example in saying, we've dropped the gate. We've dropped that separation between us. We are all just Christians at this point. We're all just followers of God. And if that's truly what you've arrived at in your heart, you've really broken down these fences and divisions that divide you from your brother, and you're really working your hardest with them to bring forth Zion, then you are ready when that gate drops, and it's coming soon. It's coming soon, right? When that gate drops, you will be ready to jump up with all.
Can I get an amen? Preach on, preacher. Let's go.
And it's huge because when it happens, then we have a group in the spirit world that is preparing itself for this. When that gate drops, they will jump up into the higher level and they will start appearing to people on earth. And we will have light beings within our temples appearing to people, right? And Owaski goes into a lot of detail into this on how exactly it happens and how they teach people. Will you be ready? Or will you be part of these groups like John Van Lance, Mormon Stories, who have like he's trying to do good, and yet he's focused so much on the divisions between us that he's giving up faith and religion in the name of individualism.
Lance, I want to share something. I didn't think I would actually share this, but there was something that happened on Sunday when I was down in St. George. I was having a high-level spiritual conversation with some people that I was staying with down there. They're business partners of mine. And we had just got home from church, and I was sharing some things with them. And their 29-year-old daughter was in the room. And as I was speaking, her eyes got really big. And she says, Shane, I see Christ. I see Christ behind you. I see Christ. And then her mother started to cry. And it was a very overwhelming spiritual experience. I turned behind me. I couldn't see what they saw. So maybe I'm not in that elevated of a state to see that, but they were seeing some kind of light being who they thought was Christ standing behind me. And so I agree that these things are happening. They are coming. There is especially with what's just happened, we're filming this on September 19th. Let me remind you that September 21st is when Moroni came. Let me remind you that was 200 years ago in 1824 that he came just to pop in and visit. He first came in 1823. There is an energy that is coming to this earth right now, and I am literally watching Lance in this moment, receiving that information and giving it to all of you. And it's happening. So don't discount it. Take it for what it's worth. Study it out in your own mind. Contemplate this, research it, go look at these documents that Lance is bringing forward, go look at these books. I didn't even know about this one that Lance pulled up with the writing on it that corroborates what Joseph Smith received 200 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much good stuff in here. And I think that, like I said, that there are portions that are corrupted, so take parts that you can with it. I'm going to read one section before I jump back to DNC 76 and talk about it really quick. Okay, so listen to this right here. It says, with progression comes also responsibility. With learning comes responsibility. And with wisdom also. You bound your subjects to your kingdoms. This is talking about kind of these false gods that exist in the lower heavens that kind of keep people bound into sectarianism. You taught them your kingdom was most high, and that they must now unlearn. You taught them that you were the all-highest gods, that they must be unlearned in this also. You put aside the ancient rites and ceremonies in which the name of Jehovah was used. Right, which it goes into detail. These rites and ceremonies, these temple rites, are essential to creating a group that can progress into the highest heavens, right? Teaching them to sing to you only. They must be taught now new songs, substantiating the great spirit to whom none can attain forever. Taught them, anyway, let me go on. And now touching the law of resurrection, remember that this is the same in all created worlds, which is that the spirit of man grows by giving away whatever the spirit has to give. If you have great learning and you give it, then more learning shall be added to you. If you have goodness of heart and gentle words, then by giving this away, more shall be added to you. If you have craft and inventions and mechanics, and you bestow these talents to others, then more will be added to you. As the corporal man accumulates corporal things, not by giving them away, so they accumulate not so accumulate the spirits of man. For he who locks up the light of the Father that is in him cannot obtain more light. He who locks up goodness of heart cannot obtain strength of spirit. And without strength of spirit, no man can attain the third resurrection. But so by men you may learn to obtain strength of spirit. The second resurrection has been established in Atmospheria, which is the spirit world, belonging to all the inhabitants of the corporal worlds. And then here he talks about times and half times have I given to my earthly worlds and their heavens. In time have I made a full resurrection to those who aspire to it. And it talks about the mechanics of that.
Tell me that's not scripture.
I mean, it's so huge where he's talking about times and half times, and he talks about the 7 times. He's referencing Daniel, he's referencing all sorts of things and these galactic conditions I was talking about that bring about resurrection, which is coming soon. Okay, so I want to hit one topic really quick that might is a reason why a lot of people are confused when they're talking about these things. And then we're going to end, okay? Even though I didn't really get to the law of one, but the law of one is pretty spectacular, and it breaks things into like 7 divisions into 3, which it also says that, you know, you could do it 3 if you want. It doesn't really matter whether you break them into 7, into 3, into 1,000. It's all just kind of symbolic anyway. So pick your poison. But it talks about not the spirit world very much, because the spirit world, it talks about space, time, and time, space, right? And space over time is like the temporal world that we live in right now, and time over space is the spirit world, which it also calls inner planes. It has all these concepts that really are the exact same concepts, just using very different words. And it talks too about how you rise between these different groups. But I won't get it very, very much into it, but it's an interesting one to check out, although it takes a lot longer to break through the language barrier, which I said, most of the time semantics, these language barriers, are the things that really divide us more than anything, right? The whole Tower of Babel is still killing us. Like, we can't get past the language barriers. When I say one word, it means one thing to me. When you say the same word, it means something different to you, or you use a different word for the same concept, and that separates us. You have to overcome that to make it into these higher heavens. Okay, but let me go back really quick to what I think might confuse people when they read this, and that has to do with a misunderstanding that's crept into Mormon theology, right? And this was not originally, and that is the idea that the 3 degrees of glory talked about in DNC 76 are states after the resurrection. Okay, I want to make this really clear. DNC 76, the 3 degrees of glory, telestial, terrestrial, and celestial, is primarily referring to the spirit world. Okay, let me say that again. The telestial, terrestrial, and celestial kingdoms talked about in DNC 76 are primarily referring to the spirit world, although dualistically, they do also refer to the earth and the state of the resurrection. Okay, now let me clarify that, because it's kind of confusing, right? And you can go through here and you can find out that Joseph Smith himself, right, in History of the Church, he says very clearly that the world of spirits, right, in his 1843 sermon right before his death on temple work, he says that belief in one universal heaven and hell was false, there being instead in the world of spirits 3 glories and 3 heavens, as Paul said. And he talks about many mansions and Paul's prophecy, referring to DNC 76 too, saying that this is the world of spirits. Okay, there's so much wording in there that makes it very clear, and I go through it in this article, that DNC 76 is talking about the spirit world. So on our missions, when we kind of show the spirit world only separated into prison and paradise, right, and then say that the 3 degrees of glory are places after that, we are teaching wrong. Okay, that's not true. The 3 degrees of glory are the spirit world. Joseph Smith makes it clear in that sermon. There's 2 whole pages that's his entire point, that there are 3 degrees, right, which are actually symbolic in themselves, but important to understand that those are 3 places of the spirit world. Okay, that the terrestrial kingdom is essentially the equivalent of the teaching of purgatory, a place of preparation where spirits are prepared, right, who received not the gospel in the flesh, but afterwards received it. It says that specifically in DNC 76. In the terrestrial kingdom, they are taught more perfectly so that then they can obtain the same glory. Okay, and that's actually important, both for understanding the idea of LDS universalism, which I teach in this article, right? It helps us transcend the sectarian mindset. It helps us be ready for what's coming here soon, having a true Zion community and being ready to be resurrected into the third resurrection, the celestial resurrection. Okay, but another thing that I think is just really important to understand is that dualistically, they are also teaching about the earth, because this is what's crazy. So in the spirit world, you basically have all the states of the earth through time in one place. Now, we live on a telestial earth, hell, right? This world is hell. We went through that and going no more out. Like, people who go to hell, they go here, right? And reincarnation is probably an aspect of that, whether it be across cycles or in one cycle. You can speculate on that all you want, but there is a coming back down to people who go to hell, right? And they get recycled between the 2 realms.
Lance, do you think there are people that can choose to come down here, and then people that don't have a choice? This is just where they're at. They're stuck in the cycle.
I mean, I'll tell you what Gone West says about it, which is really what I kind of believe too, right? He's talking about, when we get the first part of it, he talks only about the 2 lower abodes. And he says, this work deals with the 2 lowest only. And since this is the telestial and terrestrial, the most exalted spirits rise higher and higher without the need of reincarnation. whereas more lowly spirits need to return to Earth to develop certain characteristics, right? And like I said, but we went through that in another video, whether that's, you can look at it so many different ways, whether it's between dimensions, whether it's only through major cycles. And so it doesn't actually happen. Anyway, I'm not going to speculate on that right now. That there's just a lot of speculation.
Is this,
when
Jesus says he condescended below all things, he obviously had attained a level of significance, but he chose to basically descend.
Well, and he says that John the Baptist is Elias, right? Which is just a Greek word for Elijah. So he says this is basically, and they're asking him, is this Elijah reincarnating? He said, yeah, this is Elias. Take that for what it was, the titles versus what happens. But I think that the law of one teaches very clearly that higher beings do incarnate from time to time to do important works, right? So that they can come down to do important works. They're celestial beings. They have no reason to come back to a celestial world, but they do just to help other people out. In the same way that those messengers will teach within the spirit world.
Super powerful.
Okay, so
for this end.
Yeah. So then the point I want to catch is we're in a celestial world right now. We're in hell, but the millennium will be a terrestrial world. We all know that, right? So then, and then in the world at one point will be celestialized, right, and be turned into like unto a sea of glass, which the law of one goes into detail too. That it calls them third, fourth, fifth in density, but it says by fifth density you can't even comprehend these beings. If they appear to you, they appear as light. They don't even look like just people. They appear as light beings, right? And it says that after that, they don't even have a physical vehicle that looks like light. They become these social memory complexes that essentially live in suns, which is crazy because this is a book channeled like in 1980 with our modern understanding of physics, because all its ideas of physics, and it's parroting ideas that Joseph Smith gave in the 1800s, right? Because it says that at some point, like the existence completely transcends everything that we understand by the time you get to these really high levels. Right. And so there's so much amazing stuff.
And Lance, people get worried. They get like this nervous feeling like I'm going to lose my individuality. And it's just one of those things. Don't think about that. Let it go. We are in a telestial plane and a telestial body with a telestial brain. And so don't worry yourself that you're going to lose your individuality. Understand that obviously, when you get to that level, you'll understand it, and it is far better than what we can comprehend right now in this current telestial realm that we're in.
Yeah. OASP covers that exact same principle, and it uses the analogy that the very first step in the second resurrection, the terrestrial glory, is marriage, right? And it talks about the importance of marriage and how that is basically the symbol. Like when you get married to somebody, you become one, and yet do you lose your individuality? No, you synergize.
No, you don't, but you have literally on the drive home from St. George, my wife and I were in the car, and there's a scripture in Mark, and it's talking about becoming one flesh, and let what God has ordained, let no man put asunder. I'm probably botching it. And I asked my wife, I'm like, what does that mean? And you know what she said to me? It was so powerful. She said, Shane, it means your mission is my mission, and my mission is your mission. And I like high-fived her. I got all teary-eyed, and I'm like, that's it. That we got it. And for me, like I've been married twice. And I was telling my stake president last night when I was meeting with him, he's like, how's Angie? I'm like, I am so in love. I am so in love. I thought I was in love my first marriage, and I love my wife, and I love that experience. But literally, if Angie woke me up at 3:30 in the morning, it's like, hey, I need some orange juice, and it's in Tooele, I'd go. I would literally, this is how I know how in love I am, because I would literally do anything for her, 100%. And we have been focused on creating that oneness, and we've been married for 4 years now, and it hasn't always been easy, and it hasn't always been perfect, and I haven't always felt exactly like I feel right now. It's been a process that we've gone through, and I think you're exactly right, Lance. This is how we begin to create oneness. It's like, hey, let me see if you can become one with somebody who's very different than you, who's of the opposite sex, who thinks different, their emotions are different, and let's see if you can create oneness. Can you do that? Okay. Once you can do that, let's see if you can do that with a community of people. And then it grows and grows and grows.
Exactly.
For people not from Utah, Tooele is kind of akin to Somalia of Utah.
We're outer darkness.
Hey, Shane, if you go to Tooele to get that orange juice, say hi to Denny for me.
The art
He'll
of
do.
the world. You know, my sister-in-law lived in Tooele. We love to joke about Tooele. Anyway, that was beautiful, Shane. That was absolutely right. Absolutely right. And it's like once we can learn to treat everybody in that same way that we would treat our spouse that we love so much, once the evangelical can treat the Mormon, or the Mormon can treat the evangelical, and then we'll just call each other followers of Christ. And not only that, we jump up and we actually realize the truth within, Hinduism, Buddhism. We all just understand that we are followers of the Father. We are followers of the same Father, right? And that all of our gospels will mesh together. They'll meld within the molding influence of love, so that you won't have divisions among you.
So there's interesting in the Nemenha record, Manti chapter 3, there's a guy that shows up named Fu Zen. And I think personally, like he's Buddhist or he's Hindu, he's from the Orient and he's teaching their teachings. And these people aren't like, hey, we don't want to hear what you have to say. Like, we're living the law of consecration. We know everything. No, they heard what he had to say. They took in what he had to say. And then when he started to teach a different doctrine that they didn't agree on, they didn't just cast him out. They said, hey, okay, I'm going to hear what you have to say. Yeah. They all took it to the Lord. They came back and said, this was the revelation. Then they turned around and taught him. And instead of him getting mad, being like, you don't know what you're talking about, he went back to the Lord. He repents and says, thank you for teaching me. And it's a beautiful, go read Manti chapter 3, and you can get this whole thing. And it's a beautiful story on what we can do as we interact with people that are from other faiths.
Yeah, I just read that. You know what? I've had in my mind, I would love to see a tradition start within the LDS church, right? And this tradition is, I would love that everybody were to bring flowers to conference. Everyone just bring a flower, bring a rose to conference. And when you see that person out there picketing, saying you're going to hell or whatever it is, you place that flower right at their feet, right? If everybody at the church, every time you saw somebody bashing on the church, everyone holding up their sign or picketing, even in maybe the gay pride parade, if everyone just gave each other flowers and said, look, you know what? We have differences in what we believe is right and wrong. We have differences in what we believe will get you to heaven. But that doesn't matter as far as love being so much more important. You are my brother. I love you. We can talk about things respectfully, and we should honestly just all go to the Lord. Let's give a flower to everybody who we hate to show our love for them. But at the same time, we can still hash out these ideas on how to build the kingdom, because that's what it's all about, building the kingdom.
I love that.
Let me share my screen for one more thing, and then let's kind of wrap this up. I just want to solidify what I mean by, so the 3 degrees of glory, and like I said, I make this very clear in my article. Every bit of the wording within those refers to spirits. Like it makes references or allusions to New Testament scriptures, which say, the spirits of just men made perfect. Like it says right there, spirits. Every single reference is to spirits. Like it's pretty obvious. This is talking about the spirit world. Read Joseph Smith's sermon. He's talking about the spirit world. But like I say, it's not so horrible that we've got it wrong, because in the temple, like we learn that the earth itself will go through those same glories, celestial, terrestrial, and celestial through time. And so you could say there is a dualism in there, where dualistically it is kind of talking about the earth and the period after the resurrection. And that's what I've tried to really kind of show in this illustration. You can see that you've got the 3 degrees of glory right here in the earth's spiritual plane, right? Which is like the inverse of the physical plane. But we do get resurrected into, like as the earth goes around, you can see my little picture of the galaxy. As the earth orbits its way around the galactic core here in the Milky Way, it passes through these different regions, and those regions have an effect upon the planets that go through them. And the earth itself will change its orientation of its magnetic field, and matter itself will actually change as we go through the different, like, neutrino flux. Like, anyway, I have an article.
The old heaven passes away, and the new heaven, and the old heaven, and the new heaven.
Exactly. So planets like change from one glory to another, and we will be resurrected into those glories as we're ready for them. Like if you were to jump, you could jump the terrestrial if you wanted to, so that on Earth, you didn't have to come forth in the millennium. You just jump straight to when the Earth is transfigured into a celestial kingdom, right? And as a sea of glass. Does that make sense?
I recall a video of our solar system that we're in, and how it shows that, yeah, we're all circling around the sun, but the sun is also going through the universe. And when I think of you saying that we're going to be passing through, different environments in this universe, it reminds me of that. And so, that's amazing.
The last thing is a lot of detail as far as the Earth's orbit around the galactic core, about how it has a spiral motion, how that is related to light and to photons. Anyway, all sorts of crazy stuff that, goes into speculative areas. None of this should be things that are taught in Elders Quorum, because the way that the gospel is taught to us is very simple. It's something that a kid can understand, and that's why it's taught the way it is. It's fun to speculate in these things. They really help your understanding, so you can clear up other people's misconceptions that keep us separated from each other. But it's not really important. I want the main point that I'm trying to make here, and that all these works and books talk about, is that it's all about loving your neighbor. It's all about creating a Zion community. And if we want to be worthy for these higher groups, these third resurrection celestial groups, to minister to us once the end of times the Gentiles happens and that fence opens up, we have to be part of communities that are serving each other and are actually doing good and building Zion. It's only those groups that will be worthy to have Christ appear to them in the temple, right? When you're working together, Christ will come and realize that the temple, the most important temple, is here in our heart. The most important temple we're building is the ward and the stake that we're building. It's the service that we do to our neighbor. It's bringing meals to the old lady down the street. Like, that is Zion. That is the true temple. Every ordinance, everything, baptism, they're all just symbols pointing us toward those ideas. And if we see through the symbol, like, maybe I'll do this one quick thing that's so awesome, right? Like, the scriptures call it shadow of good things to come, or the shadow of the realities themselves. And it's almost like Plato's cave, right? Where he talks about how that there is a reality outside of this, and everything that we see in this world is just like a shadow of the true reality, right? And if you've read the scripture where, I'm going to just look at it really quick and read it, end on it. So this is like a combination of the NIV and the NLT translation of this scripture in 2 Corinthians. But it's so beautiful, right? So it says the law, in other words, the ordinances, right? And we can apply this to ourselves, because we have this same issue within Mormonism, where we tend to be a little pharisaical sometimes, some of us, even me, right? So the law, or the Jewish ordinances, is only a shadow of the good things that are coming, not the realities themselves. For this reason, it can never, by the same sacrifice, right, same ordinances, repeat endlessly year after year, make perfect those who draw near to worship. He has made us competent as ministers in the new covenant, not to the letter, right, that which is written, but of the Spirit. For the letter of the law kills, but the Spirit, meaning the truth behind the symbols, gives life. And that's so beautiful. If we can always remember that all of our ordinances, everything in the temple that we learn, from baptism, from the highest ordinances in the temple, those are not the realities themselves, right? Baptism, feeding for the dead, all these things, that's not the reality. Every one of these is a symbol pointing us toward a principle that leads us to live a Christ life individually, and as a Zion community communally. And if we really see past those ordinances, right, and live that Christ-like personality, live to be like Christ, if Christ really is our goal, to become like him, and we gain a character like him, we will be ready when that door opens, right, to obtain a resurrection and commune with beings who are going to come visit. And we only have, a few decades at the most before this amazing opportunity like starts. It's going to be spectacular, but it's got to be like a fire. We've got to get ready.
The age of Aquarius.
Yeah. Lance, I feel like we barely touched on, we went deep, and I feel like we barely touched on the subject of what our eternal progression is. So what I'd like to do is we're going to do a part 2, maybe a part 3, and really go through this article, because it is important. It is deep. And it helps us understand that we need to quit focusing on what our differences are and maybe focuses on what we have in common. And let's just start there. Let's build on that. And oftentimes we start a discussion with somebody that maybe is a part of a different sect or faith, and we want to talk about our differences. Maybe what we should first start with is, what do we have in common? Like, what do we both believe in, and start there rather than starting out with what we can't agree on. Maybe we should start on what we do agree on as we build out Zion. And as you mentioned, a shadow, it causes me to think of 2,000 years ago. around 2,000 years ago, you had a group of people and you had a man named Jesus Christ that showed up to bring the truth, to bring the gospel. And because people were so hardened in their ways, convinced that they knew more than anybody else, they crucified the Son of the Most High God. And because that's a shadow, we can learn from that to make sure that we don't make the very same mistakes. That when the John the Baptist shows up, we don't call him a wild man. We listen to that man. When we see these things are a shadow, we know what happened then is going to happen now when he makes his return a second time. So let us have open hearts. Let us take videos. Like, we're now living in an age where we can do this. Like, this is incredible. That you can be in Cedar City. I can be in Farmington. David can be in Orem. Trevor can be in Kaysville. And we can have this discussion. These are important things. There are other books like the Owaspy. What was that other book you were reading from that had the person's drawing on? I had never seen that.
That was Owaspy. He has so many drawings in there.
So Owaspy, but there was another one, JS.
Oh yeah, JS and Ward. That's Gone West. JS.
Okay. Is that on Kimura?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I need to read this. These are things I've been in the Owaspy. I got the Owaspy literally right over here. But there is more information. We are told to search out of the best books. It's in our scriptures. So, Lance, thank you so much for bringing this stuff to light. It's interesting that your information that you put out there, I saw the dates. It's like 2010, 2011 when these were first published.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
And truthfully, I don't think humanity was ready for it. That's why I think it sat there. It came to you and it sat there. And now is the time. Now is the time that we should all prepare to meet God. Take these things serious. Go on Lance's website. Read them. Study them. Search them. Let's talk about them. Let's have a discussion about them. If you watch this video and you liked it, well, like it and then share it. Share these videos. We are doing this because part of our goal, and the reason why our channel is called Zion Media, is because we are going to attempt to create Zion, which is what we're here to do. And these are teachings that can help prepare you. And I would tell you that if you want to create Zion, first create Zion in you. Once you've created Zion in you, then try to create Zion with your spouse and become one and start there and start building there. And if you can do, like, I'm only in building Zion with my spouse. So like I feel like I'm doing it, right? And once we can all do that, become one with our spouse, then we can start creating these communities. And if you're interested in what a Zion community looks like, there's a record out there. It's the Nemenhah record. It's the only record that I'm familiar with of a people that we have a detailed account of. We know the city of Enoch, but we don't have a detailed account of how they did it. Well, we do have that in the Nemenhah record, so go check it out, read it. It's the best book that I've found on what a people did to create a Zion community, to truly live the law of consecration and what that actually means. So, Trevor, David, any final thoughts as we wrap this? This episode is going to be one of my favorites.
One thing I'd like Lance to share, and I know we'll get into it in the future, but Lance, talk a little bit about people who have concerns about family members who maybe they're not sealed to, people that have died before baptism, and, being able to be with them and how all of that interconnects. And I know we'll talk about it, but just hit on it just a little bit, because there was several comments, people like crying in the comments, like, what about my family?
Yeah. I think that Gone West book is a great one to start with, because his brother starts in the lowest reaches and then works his way up. I think that there are certain people within every religion who like to be like, well, when you die, that's it. There's no progression after you die. Not a single one of these books suggests that. It's more difficult, but there's progression after you die. So let's say somebody leaves the church. I have so many siblings that are not in the church. Half my family, right? And am I mourning over them because it's oh, they're going to hell? It's well, what are you talking about? We're in hell right now. We're all in hell. I'm in hell. I'm so sad he's going to hell. What a hypocrite. You're saying that while you're in hell? I'm in hell. We're in hell. This is the Telestial Kingdom. And so what? Work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Love them. And when we both go into the spirit world, maybe we'll have a little more glory, because maybe they'll dive into, if they're going crazy with drugs and sex and all that, and they don't learn their lessons by the time they die, which hope that's what Earth's for, to learn those lessons. Let them learn the lessons. Let them go off and bless them while they go out and do their stupid sin. Like, sin brings pain. They'll pay for their sins because that's what sin is. It makes you pay for it. It's all pain. It's the reason why it's sin. Help them come back as soon as they're done. If they don't, by the time they die, we'll go down in hell and get them. Joe Smith said as much. We'll go down in hell and get them. And we'll because this is hell right here. We'll be just going down to the same place we were at when we were alive, and we'll teach them and be like, hey, come with me. All you need is to raise your vibration into that level of love, and we'll be there. And who knows, maybe in some cases, it's actually the person who's the sectarian, who's so sure that they're right and they're keeping all the commandments because they're a Pharisee, and yet their son who's out doing sin, they're actually going to go into the kingdom of heaven before them, just like Christ said, the publicans and them go into the kingdom of heaven before you. Be careful how you judge. Be careful how you judge yourself and others. Just love each other, right? And realize that if we're all trying to build Zion, it'll work out. It'll work out. We'll get there.
Yeah. And in closing, I will share the story of the prodigal son. And I know we all know that story, but I want to give a little twist to that story. And I would ask, of the two brothers, who garnered the most experience? The brother that went off on his own, or the brother that stayed home? And so even though we might be the one that stayed home and think that we're doing everything and that we're better, maybe the one that went off on his own and learned his lessons and came back home actually garnered greater experience. So I'm not suggesting that we all become the prodigal son, but I am suggesting that there is an interesting twist to that story.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Lance, dude, this episode has been awesome. I'm excited to dive into, go back. I read the Owaspy in prison. I have a copy of it, and I need to get back into it because you've opened my eyes to certain things. I'm so grateful, and I want all of those who subscribe and who follow Zion Media. I get messages every single day about how this channel has helped somebody come closer to Christ. And so I'm so grateful to be a part of something that is so cool, a way that I get to share the gospel. This is for me, this is all I want to do. All I want to do is bring people back to Christ. And so I'm so grateful for Trevor, for David, for guys like Lance that are willing to come on and put themselves out there and share these things. And I hope you take them serious. I hope you understand I'm not doing this because I'm hey, look at me. I'm doing this because I'm hey, look at Christ. He's coming back and we got to be prepared for it. If you want to attain that highest level, if you want to be with him, then you must learn to become like him. And so I hope that this channel helps you in some ways. And I know that it is because I get messages every single day. So thank you for your messages. Thank you for taking the time to like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for sharing this message. What a great way to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. Thank you to YouTube for allowing this platform to take place so that truly the gospel of Jesus Christ can be spread to all the four quarters of the earth. Because wherever there are people, there is likely YouTube in most places in the world. And it's thanks to Elon Musk, we're going to have the internet in every part of the world. So no matter where you are, you can hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. You don't need the guys in the white shirts and the badges to teach you. There is information on this thing called the World Wide Web. So for myself, I'm Shane Baldwin. For David the Lion Douglas and Trevor the Key Keys, and for our amazing guest who is the fourth member of our podcast, Lance Weaver, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
If you could hide a Zion in the blink of an eye, and then continue onward as stars move through the sky, could you reach the endless heavens where mysteries still unfold? or find a place of ages where stories have been told. Worst beginning, where no boundaries confine, or view the final gathering, where truth and wisdom shine. The Spirit softly whispers, no mind has seen that place, nor found the endless reaches beyond time's swift embrace. There is a path that leads to light, through mountains high and valleys wide. The journey's long, the steps are steep, but faith will guide where shadows sleep. The works of God are endless, new worlds and lives expand. Progress and growth continue in one eternal plan. There is no end to matter, there is no end to grace, there is no end to spirit, there is no end to space. And so we walk with hope in hand, towards Zion's promised land. Through every trial, through every test, we seek His peace, we find His rest. There is no end to Zion, no end to love's pure call. For those who seek His promise will find their all in all. There is no end to Zion, no end to love's pure call. For those who seek His promise will find their all in all. There is no end to Zion, to love's pure call. For those who seek His promise will find their all in all.